Thanks, Amy Rose.
Okay.
So let me welcome my panel as we kick off. David Inderias is here from Fresh Supply Co. He's originally trained as a doctor and a serial tech entrepreneur who likes to attack problems head on. This is his third successful startup and all three have been in the tech space. I'm also joined from Singapore by my colleagues from our office in Singapore, our regional head office there. Tony Murphy, a global trade expert and who spent the last few years of his career looking at how supply chains can be improved and digitized for the benefit of all parties involved. We also have Ashok Venkateswaran, who's a technology junkie and loves to learn about what's the latest in technology. Thankfully, his job at Mastercard involves looking at how we can commercialize that technology and use it to help solve real life problems, such as how we can use blockchain to solve real life problems. Let's start with David. David, I mentioned you're a serial entrepreneur and you're now successfully building a technology-based business which helps farmers and food exporters to clearly monitor the paddock to plate journey. It's a fascinating story. Can you share with the audience a little bit about Fresh Supply Co. and what your journey has been to date?
Well, thanks, Asha. Look, initially we started in food traceability. We've all heard of the different use case, that familiar use case, paddock to plate, farm to fork, all the different euphemisms, right? We've moved from, and we were a part of that, we've moved from initially consumer facing to focusing on infrastructure so that we can track assets as they move from bulk to something that is retail saleable all the way down to the consumer, right? Giving visibility and having eyes on that as it travels down through the value chain. So what is the actual value of the data that's created, right? Is it in food safety? Is it in compliance? Is it in food security? Sure. But personally, we have found the most valuable use case for us personally was making that operational data, pun intended, digestible for the financial sector. So if we have eyes and we have the innate and scalable capability to track assets as they move from here to there, and we can use those as a clear commercial indicators to the health of that company and the operations of that company. We can help to improve financial institution, credit risk decisioning, and really to be able to, open that up and democratize that based off the data.
Yeah, great. Okay, really interesting. And we're enjoying getting to know what Fresh Supply Company can do and how you work here at Mastercard. So a little bit about how you came to understand Mastercard's tech stack. I know as a serial entrepreneur and someone who's been operating in this space for a while, you get exposed to lots of different companies' tech stacks. Sure. How did you get to understand our blockchain tech stack and how did you decide on working with Mastercard?
Well, we've used all sorts of different blockchain technologies. We've always been very outcome focused versus the different technical problems, right? So we've used public chains, we've used private chains, but we've really been impressed with the speed, scalability, security of financial systems that Mastercard has. And when we apply that, we get something that doesn't feel like a science experiment, that gives businesses and consumers confidence in the data that's captured and the way we apply it, right? Plus, of course, the business as usual, which is native payments integration, the thing that Mastercard is known for globally. Right?
Yeah, and I think that coupled with our network hopefully gives you confidence around an ability to build out that network as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks, David. Ashok, now over to you. Being based in Singapore, and heading up the digital assets and cryptocurrency for Mastercard, you have a wide lens on how this commercial uptake is going and what's happening in this space. How is the space maturing? How is blockchain technology being used for commercial use cases that you've seen and been exposed to?
Thanks, Asha. So, we've been doing this stuff, especially in the blockchain space for around 3 years now. We started off by building a blockchain from scratch. So all of our technology is homegrown. We built it, we tested it, we've running a number of different applications on top of it. And one of those applications is the provenance solution that David was talking about, right? So really happy to hear that he likes the capabilities of our technology.
Like it.
Excellent. But the key factor was that we wanted to have something that we built from scratch, something that we own, and it's in the heart of our system, right? Now, as we've done that, the provenance solution is actually a really great solution, primarily because it allows you to track and trace some of the functionality, some of the areas that David is focused on, especially if you look at in Australia with the agri space. It's very important for them to really know where the goods are coming from, where they're going, what you're consuming. So the consumers today are asking for a lot more transparency on what they're putting into their body. And as a result, our blockchain solutions are able to do that. Now, in addition to purely just giving you track and trace, we're layered in payments where you can have event-based payments based on exactly where your goods are at any given moment. So therefore, you have the sellers and the buyers. Once they get into a relationship, they're getting paid in a timely manner, more efficiently than they are today. The next step we did once we had layered in our payment piece was how to potentially finance some of those pieces with trade financing, invoice discounting. Now that's the area which Tony's going to discuss in a little bit more detail. But I just wanted to kind of give you an idea that we didn't jump into everything all in one shot. We actually we took our initial piece, we made sure it worked properly, then we layered on additional solutions onto it to make sure it's stable and it's scalable.
Yeah, great, thank you. And exciting that we can get visibility across the journey of a good to help facilitate some of those payments. Tony, so we're really talking about global trade here, and it's the world that you come from, the world of global trade. From your prior experience, can you talk to us about some similar models in other industries where this operational data has been extracted and is being used widely by the parties involved in financing those supply chains?
Yeah, thanks, Asha. I think for Mastercard, we've been very active across different verticals, particularly in Australia, in the agri sector, chemicals, automotive, and retail trade. I think the experience that we're having today working with our ecosystem partners, we kind of think that there are probably key patterns emerging, and I think there's probably three key elements to that. I think the first one that we're seeing today is the opportunity for SMEs, traders to get more involved in global trade, and that's really being facilitated by our ability to provide things like digital identity. Now, it's not just about getting a blockchain address. It's really about building profiles, risk and compliance, using provenance and our blockchain solution as a basis for doing verification, integrating, being interoperable with other schemes around identity as well. So I think it's allowing us now to offer SMEs an ability to get a voice in the global market and to form new business relationships. I think the second key point is, and we see this again, I think in Australia, and the programs we've been running with David's team at Fresh Supply, is this concept of aggregation with exporters. Now, Australia is a major exporter to Southeast Asia, to China, to AP in general. And what we're seeing is that these aggregators are now able to use our solutions around provenance integrated with digital payment. And of course, that allows us then to really drive the ability to add financing to that, because if you have the data, if you've got the ability to integrate digital payment, the next step obviously is finance. I think the third key enabler, and certainly the pattern that we're seeing, I think is really in the underpinning documentation. Now, international trade, typically you can have up to 100 different documents depending on the nature of the trade. What we're seeing with our provenance solution, and certainly borne out with the work we're doing with David's team, is that we can start to digitize information, data at source. Now, if you can do that, you can negate the need to use paper. You can start to use, smart contracts. You can start to use, different business events as triggers that basically allow you to move away from a paper chase. Now, that's really simplified our ability then to integrate buyers and suppliers, but more interestingly as well, our ability to, again, add the payment and the access to financing. So these really, I think, are the key, kind of three patterns that we're seeing emerging. And I think Australia certainly, from our experience, is really at the forefront of that.
Yeah, great. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll finally see the end of paper in the trade, import and export world.
I hope so.
Yes,
it's about time.
Yes. So David, let's come back to you.
Sure.
We've heard about how supply chain management improvement helps both buyers and suppliers, so and importers and exporters.
Yep.
So, it sounds like the commercial solution we're talking about is access to funding. Is that how you would, summarize what the commercial problem is that you're solving?
Certainly, but it goes a little bit deeper. Look, we're seeing that data or data, depends on where you are, right?
Where you come from.
On the ledger, with integrity, right? Plus payments, plus lending, all coupled together, right? Does have a clear business use case. Look, if you're an ag producer, an exporter, working capital requirements are underserviced, right? And once you have exhausted traditional outlets, you have to go to alternative outlets that are extremely expensive, hardly optimal, right? So what we're doing together is working on a complementary source of finance that, in addition to, we're not trying to replace initially the traditional offerings, right? Working with financial institutions, getting them comfortable because we've got visibility. We know how that company is operating. It's healthy, right? Things are, it's functioning properly. So we're giving producers additional options, and guess what? It's all off the back of data, right?
Yeah. Great. Okay. And look, David, your work to help increase access to capital aligns perfectly with Mastercard's global support for small businesses. We're helping small businesses get access to the digital economy, which gives them more easy access to capital as well. And it's really great to work with a partner who shares those values of ours. So we've talked about the solution in what I would say fairly general terms. Can you now share some specifics about the current projects in supply chain finance, which you're working on today? Maybe Tony, that one, if you could take that one.
Sure, Asha. I think the key thing for us today is if you look at existing ecosystems. I think agri is a great example in Australia, and you look at the needs of farmers, you look at the needs of different players within the ecosystem, the marketplaces, the aggregators, the processors. What we've been looking at is how can we provide, first of all, the means to engage these different players in a solution that gives them, the ability to get paid early, for example, to look at how they can improve their cash flow. How can they de-risk their business, again, by leveraging the data and using the data as a means to optimize processes. If it means, for example, moving my grain from the farm to the silo and having better visibility over quality control, if it means being able to make more efficient decisions about distribution, and then facilitating that by leveraging the data to drive things like pay on delivery, taking out the pain of invoices that are disputed. For our partners in the lending space, whether they're more traditional lenders in the banking space or looking at more alternative lenders, particularly interestingly as well in the blockchain space, we're seeing a lot of new alternative lenders. And I think what I'm seeing there, and David and myself have been working on a number of programs where we've been able to facilitate new discussions. And I think one of the challenges with that is when you think about digitization, you think about how to enable programs that today are quite traditional, quite analog. How do you digitize them? It's really a question of how do you put the right processes in place. And I think it's really also about where you see new value being created. So our ability to start integrating, at the early stage, working with the last mile, if you want to call it that, and integrating the entire supply chain, gives the FIs, gives the financial institutions better visibility. But then they really need to leverage that in terms of making the right decisions around credit and offering new lines to their customers. So that's one of the challenges, and that's something we've been working very closely on, aligning the financing, the payment, and the data, bringing those elements together. And I think Australia, again, I think we've got a number of successes that really have proved that this does work, and there is indeed a business case for blockchain. So, we're living proof of that.
Yeah, great.
Great. So specifically, following up from what Tony was actually mentioning, it's not just promises about things that will be deployed in the future. We're really excited to share what's happening now, right? And the first use case that we're publicly sharing now is actually early payments for the horticultural sector. So really supporting agribusiness, right? So what does that actually mean? Typically, you're a farmer, you're supplying to a partner that actually distributes the product and gets it to market. It might take 28, 45, maybe 90 days in some cases, but that's not the case in this specific usage, where you'll be waiting for that cash to hit your bank account, right? And we know it's coming, right? But in the meantime, how do you actually efficiently keep your business running? You know, when conditions are tough, when you've got to pay labor, packaging, et cetera, keeping the business running, right? So what we're actually doing is instead we're shrinking that 28, 45 day payment cycle down to ASAP, right? Which in this case is, you know, a T+1. So how about next day? Why? Because we have the data that actually says, yep, this is the quality that's come in. Yep, it's been accepted, packaged up, it's gone to market. Great, right? And that's real. That's it's going to market now, and that's with Commonwealth Bank, right? So we've got great partners, and we're seeing a change in what traditional partners are actually doing, and that's not just on the receivable side. It's on the procurement and OpEx side, right? We're focusing on new business value creation, and look, it's initially in Australia. That's where we have our base and a strong foothold, right? But also we're in early development stages with in the USA and Latin American markets. We're proud to say.
Yeah, great. And so I just want to clarify one piece there. Both you and Tony have talked about early payment.
Yep.
And I just want to clarify, we're not talking about producers being paid earlier than the good being delivered. We're often talking about the producer being paid earlier than they would without the data being available. Is that effectively
just
what we're saying?
Traditional terms of trade where you'd have to wait. That may not be favorable to the smaller producer where it originates, right? We're supporting SMEs and mid-sized business in optimizing the cash flow so that we can, optimize the cash flows is a good way to put it.
Yeah, okay. All right, and I guess that early payment is without risk really to the buyer of those goods because they know where that good is. They know it's been qualified as being at the value. being at the quality it was.
Well, lenders would say otherwise. It's not no risk, but we see reduced risk. That's a better way to put it. We see where the product is. We know what the quality is. We know who took custody. We know what the typical payment cycles are, right? Yep. And what we can do is actually push the balance of what is fair towards the producer who typically doesn't have much of a say so and are at the mercy of others. Yes. Right? Yeah.
Thanks for that. I was just going to point out that I think we were getting some messages about the image on screen, but I think that's all being rectified now. So good to see that your solutions are helping access for Australian farmers and small producers onshore and offshore. We know that for Australia, agribusiness is a huge part of our growth strategy as a nation. So, we're looking for a greater share of our GDP to come from agribusiness in the future, and that's a stated government goal. Yep. So it's great to see how you're supporting that. On a slightly different area of focus, I guess, as some of our viewers might know, Mastercard, as have other organisations, has publicly stated its commitment to environmental, social and corporate governance goals. So what that means is that our global senior leadership team, their targets will be closely aligned to how we perform as an organisation in the ESG space. We know there are lots of organisations out there making similar commitments and publicly sharing similar goals. Ashok, as a representative of Mastercard, can you share with the audience how our technologies are being used and how the technologies we've been discussing today for the food supply chain solution are also being utilised to enable consumers to reduce their own carbon footprint?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm really excited about this personally, and I think it's an important impact that we're making on a global level. Because what we've done is that we understand the provenance technology, but we've kind of leveraged it to do a couple of other things. One, we've kind of tacked on an initial audit methodology to say, well, how much carbon are you really putting out in the world, right? So that way you have like a benchmark and a baseline that you start off with. Then we're developing partnerships with potential companies which are producing this carbon neutrality, carbon credit, so to say. As we build up these relationships, we can acquire these carbon credits from these firms. And then finally, we're adding that into our provenance solution where we're able to track it. So we're able to track where these carbon credits came from, when they were, then we break them down into like a coffee cup or even a t-shirt, right? And more importantly, we can actually say, when was it consumed? And once it was consumed, it's been destroyed, right? And the key element here is the fact that you're not consuming the credits over and over again. That's what usually ends up happening in a lot of these areas where they potentially sell the same credits to multiple people. What we're doing here is we're kind of nipping that in the bud to make sure that once the credits have been consumed, they're destroyed and they're no longer available for use. So what we've done is we've leveraged our technology to really use it as a track to ensure that we're using it the right way. And all of this stuff is stored on the blockchain, which most of you know is once it's on the blockchain, it's immutable and you can't really change it. Right? Now I know David is also launching one of his products where you're tracking coffee cups, tracking it down to the coffee cup level. So basically the consumer is able to actually make a direct impact to the environment as well. So every time you purchase a bag of coffee or have a cup of coffee, you're actually using or putting back into the system the number of credits that is tagged to that particular cup of coffee or a bag of coffee that you buy. So at the end of it, we're using technology which is out there, using the data which is available to bring everything together to make a direct impact to the environment.
Yeah, I think that's super exciting. And I know it's all going to be launched at Sydney Writers Festival next week. So Australia is a massive consumer of coffee. I think we might be almost, if not number one, close to that in the world in terms of our coffee consumption. So I think it's great that we're going to be able to offer to coffee buyers of coffee cups a solution which will help them to gain confidence that the goods they're consuming, they are consuming are indeed carbon neutral and those credits have been locked away. So for anyone in the audience who is attending Sydney Writers Festival next week, please do buy a coffee at Little Marionette Coffee and offset your carbon usage.
Yep. So I'll just add on to that. There's a little bit of exciting news, which is that's our partner C20. So what we're actually doing is taking carbon allowance units that would have been utilized by big polluters, and instead we're giving businesses and their consumers the ability to engage. This is what's new. Reach down and make it tangible, where a consumer will actually take that portion that's been appended to a specific product, right? So this is novel because it's reaching down to this specific good. It could be a 3 liter of milk, it could be a cup of coffee, it could be sunglasses, it could be a t-shirt. The carbon footprint of that product will be offset with full integrity upstream, but it can also be claimed by the consumer that chooses to purchase that product, right? Okay, so the last piece I'll actually leave is we've got some product here, right? We've got the crypto anchor, we've got a marker there. It's live, it's real, it's not a science experiment. And these are actually NFTs, right? So we've heard a lot of hype around NFTs and about $500,000 or multi-million-dollar digital art. This is an NFT for good. An NFT where we're actually syncing the allowance unit and preventing that amount of pollution going into the environment, right? So you heard it here. It's NFTs on the Mastercard Provenance blockchain for good, right? That is affordable and accessible by consumers. So head on down to the Sydney Writers Festival and actually and take part, right? This is available to any consumer here. So NFTs, real products on MC Provenance running now, right? So we're really excited to share.
And David, that's a really exciting note to wrap our panel up on. Just before we do round off, Amy Rose, if I could just check with you if there are any questions on the chat. I saw a couple come through.
Hello, everybody. I'm just going to have a look at the chat. Can you see the chat there?
I'll just bring that up.
Yep. There's nothing in the Q&A.
There was a question there. How do you link the physical to the digital nanoparticles with DNA?
No. So we look, we acquire the data at the source. In many cases, we're actually taking these from machines that may be scanning an avocado. We use data standards like GS1, where we're pulling information that's already an identifier. We really take all that data, cross-reference it to get an overall picture of an asset, right? And whether that's a lava marker, a cryptographic anchor, a QR code, we digitally enable in some cases where there's a consumer, right? Or we just leverage the existing supply chain marking, right? Because there are existing ERP systems, data systems that can actually track from a production and supply chain level. They exist, right? So sometimes they're marked, sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's just a big cohort of whatever that commodity might be, beef, grain, etc., right? But we know that we have eyes on it, right?
Yeah, great. Thank you, David. Ashok, I think you're on mute if you wanted to add to that.
No, I was, just agreeing with what David was saying.
Okay, all right, great. So thanks everyone for joining us virtually today. And thank you, Ashok, Tony, and especially David for joining us in partnership and on the panel today. Please do take a look both at the Fresh Supply Co.'s website and Mastercard's website to learn more about what we're doing in this space. And also to take a look at to see how you can use our blockchain technology to verify information about where your produce comes from, and now also to verify your carbon credits and store those away. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks all. Cool.
Nice.
Are we not?
Amy, we'll see you later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.